Welcome back to OpenLine, talking about traffic and some new proposals that are out there to deal with mass transit in our entire region. Several calls. We'll just go back to the phones. Let's go to Michael. Hello, Michael.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Thank you for taking the call.
Sure.
So there's a lot of news out about these self-driving cars, and I'm just wondering if in your planning, if you're considering the fleets of self-driving cars. I know we're not there yet, but we're going to be there pretty quick from what I've read. Are you considering any of that in your planning?
So it's a 25-year plan. That is an interesting question. What about that issue?
First of all, any of us who say we can predict the next 25 years, I have some oceanfront property to sell you in Goodlettsville. Autonomous vehicles has been coming up a lot in the conversation. There's no doubt in that time period they're going to play a much larger role. Really hard to predict, and frankly the private sector is going to drive that innovation and that implementation. There are really two places in the plan that we hit on autonomous vehicles where we say there are real opportunities. One is in terms of the regional commute corridors, and I'll say the Murfreesboro to Nashville, Franklin to Nashville, what have you. A lot of our focus is what we're calling expressway bus rapid transit, so it's a managed lane approach. It would be ultimately a dedicated lane that could be used initially for high occupancy vehicles, mass transit. That could start to segue into the autonomous vehicle lane as that technology comes online with fully autonomous vehicles. Particularly, there are a lot of things going on in the over-the-road trucking, so maybe to get some of those trucks off the road. The other innovation you're seeing with autonomous vehicles, Uber in particular is big in researching this, how we do those little local circulation trips. So you could very well see a system in the future where the mass transit component is designed around getting larger numbers of people in a corridor a long distance, and then that it could be the rideshare operators or the taxis now, and ultimately autonomous vehicles get you that last mile or two, into the neighborhood or in through that business park.
So it's certainly something you've thought about. We just don't know where that's going to go.
Yeah, to say this is exactly how we're going to deploy autonomous vehicles and this is exactly when. Boy, I think if we had that kind of crystal ball, we'd move to Wall Street, make $1 billion, and and just visit Nashville as guests.
So this plan overall, as we've said, $6 billion. That's if it were implemented all at once. It's not going to be. But how tough do you think it will be to sell the cost of this? Is there a way you would go about doing that? Or you think people are willing and ready to pay for it? What do you think?
Well, I know Commissioner Schauer at TDOT puts it very well. People have to be past a certain pain threshold to decide that they're going to want to pay for something. If we look at the formula, what other cities have done, and when I say other cities, I mean southern cities, western cities, really auto-dependent cities, that have started to get to the point where Nashville is. The formula has been you reach a certain critical mass of problem. People perceive there's a real issue. You try to build around a credible plan and show people what that plan is and do exhaustive communication about it. And by and large, these are hitting the ballot boxes all over the country, and on average, they're passing by a 70% margin, or 70% rate. 70% of these referenda are passing when people can see this is the benefit I'll get, this is when I'm going to get it, this is what it's going to cost me, and this is how you're going to charge me. So the communication in this is critically important.
How much of this, Mayor, do you think is something that goes before voters, and how much would be decided by individuals, city councils, and that kind of thing?
Well, I think that if you're looking towards a solution that would involve some sort of dedicated funding, that would be something where you would have to have voter input throughout the various counties if we're going to have a pool of money that's dedicated from a source, and that would be from the individuals in the various counties. They would have to vote on it. So, and that's what other states are doing, that's what other regions are doing. They're having referendum on that particular issue, asking people, well, we can provide you this option, but would you like to tax yourself to do it? Would you like to pay an additional dollar or an additional penny on the sales tax or additional dollar on your vehicle registration, some method by which the voters they have some skin in the game too, by saying, I'm going to pay this, and now you're going to have to make sure you give me some options. And I think that's what's happened across the country in other states and regions, and that's an option for us, because we're never going to be able to fund this entire program just with federal dollars or just with state dollars. It's going to take some input from those people who actually use the services that we're going to be providing.
And when you've looked around at other regional sort of situations, which we're very much a regional situation, and so when you start talking about that, so let's say voters in Davidson County and Metro say, yes, I'm all in, and Clarksville, they say, yes, I'm all in. Voters in, X County and X County say, no, I'm not in. So what kind of challenge does that present?
Well, I think you can talk about this, Steve, but I think we look at it in terms of corridors, and we look at the counties and the cities along the corridors. For example, you mentioned, Clarksville and Nashville. Well, you can build in the other counties between Nashville and Clarksville, and so you've got Ashland City, you've got Cheatham County, you've got those counties, and if all of those counties buy in, then you can start the improvements in that corridor while you're trying to work on the other corridors.
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. And when a lot of people have talked about, well, what order would you go in with these projects, frankly, a lot of them is going to be the speed with which various counties and cities want to buy into that plan. So it is very much a scalable thing. The other thing I'd mention, Ben, is, $6 billion, that's hard for anybody, even people who deal in those numbers, to kind of spit that number out. So one of the things we do, and we hope that people will look through the document, is we break that down on a per capita basis, both on the current population of Middle Tennessee and our projected growth. And over that 25-year period, it amounts to about $15 per person per month. So that's sort of how you... the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time.
And I bet there are a lot of people that would be willing to pay that to get out of some of the mess traffic-wise they're in now. And when it's presented that way, there may be some success there. And when you throw out the $6 billion figure, and then you throw out other cities, $30 billion.
Yep,
you said Seattle.
Seattle's doing a $30 billion.
What in the world are they doing? It's that much more expensive.
One might argue they waited too long. And a lot of what they're having to do, frankly, is rail in tunnel. And underground is extremely expensive.
And so that could be a cautionary sort of tale for us.
Yeah. I think Mayor McMillan put it very well. The longer we wait, the more expensive it gets.
And so how confident are you that people will choose these options once they're in place? So let's say, everything goes well, they're in place. People love their cars. Do you think people will get out of their cars? What do both of you think about that?
It's situational. I mean, people are pretty smart consumers. When it makes more sense to drive by yourself in a car, you're going to drive by yourself in a car. But if that means sitting in traffic for hours on end, if it means paying $30 or $40 to park, you will look at reasonable and competitive alternatives. And we've had so many public meetings, it's hard to keep track, but I can remember one in particular where a woman raised her hand and said, look, I'm a realtor. I'm in and out of my car all day. I cannot envision ever using mass transit to go to work. But man, would it be great to be able to take it into the city for a Predators game on a Saturday night, not have to worry about the traffic, not have to worry about the parking, not have to worry about whether I have one or two drinks at the game. And when we look at those markets, it's not about trying to force everybody to use mass transit. It's about providing a competitive range of options so that all Middle Tennesseans, including those now who can't afford to drive or can't by reason of physical disability drive, give everybody better options on how they get around for all the different trips they take.
I don't know if it's a southern thing, but it seems like there is this reluctance for whatever reason to use mass transit or to get on a bus. You think we're going to overcome that?
Well, I think so, and I agree with you. I think that in the South, because we've been longer to go with this option of different mass transit, but I think in this case they will eventually do it. And I keep using the example because it's what I know from Clarksville to Nashville, and the people that have now decided that they're going to use the commuter bus to get to work, they tell me, I don't know how I did this before. It's air conditioned. There's a restroom. I've got internet. I can actually work from the time I leave Clarksville until the time I get to Nashville. I can get so much done. And, I think once they realize that and they experience it, all of a sudden it becomes a different world.
It's giving up control. But I feel like if they do feel like it's dependable, as it is, I guess, in the Northeast. You get on the train, you read your paper, you drink your coffee. It's a much better experience.
Yeah. Dependable and faster. I think a woman that I talked to in Murfreesboro at a session put it pretty succinctly. Commutes to Nashville every day in that traffic and said, look, it's pretty simple, stupid. You make it faster than my car. I don't care if it's a pedal tavern. I'll use it. And that's really where people are coming to. If you get on the Music City Star on any given morning, we talked earlier that, that service could use more trips. People who ride that train refer to it as the best kept secret in Middle Tennessee. And you want to see controversy. If we ever talked about curtailing or reducing or eliminating that service, those folks would be up in arms. I mean, they love it. And when you talk about dependability, pretty much every day, if I turn Channel 5 on, the traffic report's talking about accident on 40, accident on 24, accident on 65. And that's what people are frustrated by. People kind of live with, if my commute's a little longer, I get it. What I don't know when I leave the house, is it going to be 25 minutes? Is it going to be 45 minutes? Is it going to be an hour and a half? And that really is going to hamper, our ability to maintain a quality of life here if we can't deal with that issue.
I totally agree. That is the frustration. All right, so we talked about some of the short-term proposals in the plan. So we have short-term, middle, long-term. What are the middle proposals?
Middle-term proposals would be some of those bigger improvements in corridors, particularly in the regional corridors. So things like the freeway bus rapid transit that we talked about, particularly in combination with other work that TDOT would be doing in those corridors to improve general flow of traffic and and interchanges. So you're still talking about, in the 10 or 15 year time frame, probably still by and large, while there might be still some beginnings of a rail system, still largely bus oriented, but significant improvements in travel speed and reliability. So a lot of those, and a lot of the focus is in those regional corridors. The Nashville area MPO has defined in their current plan, their $8.6 billion 25-year plan, which encompasses all road, bridges, transit, the Sumner County corridor, so the Gallatin to Nashville corridor, the Murfreesboro to Nashville corridor, and the Williamson County to Nashville corridor, in those priority treatments.
Okay, let's go to Cindy. Hello, Cindy.
Hi.
Go right ahead.
Hi, so I saw some programs about cable cars and gondolas that are really interesting. They seem to be much cheaper than rail systems to build, and I think that would be great for Nashville. Have you thought of those?
What did you say? What is cheaper? Did you understand that?
Gondolas and cable car systems, they run above ground.
Okay.
So you're not building anything on ground. It's kind of like skyscraper. It's popular in South America. They even have some in New York.
All right, thank you, Cindy, for the call.
Closer to the microphone.
Oops.
Okay. Sorry.
I think that message was directed at me.
What about what Cindy said? What did she say?
Sure.
Just repeat what she said and what.
Yeah, Cindy's question revolved around other technologies, particularly what's being used in South America and Europe, gondolas, cable cars. We've heard folks talk here about monorail. In any of these larger corridor projects, what NMotion is trying to provide the context of a regional system and how pieces fit together. So when we get serious about a corridor, I'll use the Clarksville to Nashville corridor as an example, where we're currently doing pretty detailed corridor planning study. You look at a range of those mode options and you try to select the best mode. What you want to make sure in a regional system is that you have consistency of what the technology is, so that I don't have to change 4 times. If I'm changing from a monorail to a gondola to a bus to a light rail train, you start bleeding ridership. And the thing specifically with what Cindy talked about, cable cars in particular, gondolas, what you'll tend to see with them is there's very specific geographic or topographic. Gondolas are used very often when you've got a huge vertical lift. You don't see them very often in, I'll say, the 40-mile commute that is Clarksville to Nashville, or some of the longer distance commutes, because they just don't have the speed and the passenger throughput of some of the other technologies.
And you get asked those kind of questions about Clarksville.
Yes, absolutely. You get asked a lot of questions about what about streetcars, what about options like that, and those are really for your in-town type of traffic, not so much the regional perspective going from one county to another or traveling throughout the region. That's more things that are specifically related to what can you do in town to continue that traffic. But I think, like Steve has said, really you have to focus on that last mile. It's fine to be able to get from Nashville to Clarksville, but what happens when you get to Clarksville and you need to get to the apartment complex that somebody lives in?
Yeah.
So we really have to make all of this work together and
Seamless.
focus on those types of
Yeah.
options.
And actually, in the early wins, or the things we'll be shooting for earlier, we're working extensively with Vanderbilt and their technology area on seamless, say, smartphone systems, where kind of the trip planner thing where you can do it seamlessly. So maybe if, well, I got to grab a taxi to a transit stop and then walk a distance, you have that all planned out for you. It's integrated payment system, so making it as simple and seamless to the end user as possible. And those are things we can be doing in the next couple of years. That we don't have to wait 20 years for that type of technology.
And it's interesting you said the early wins. I mean, there's no doubt you want to have some successes. You know, have some things that work, that get out there, and people say, okay, this can work.
This works.
Because that was rough. The thing we had with the AMP and that whole discussion. I think you're looking. Is it accurate to say you're looking for things that can be implemented as quickly and as effectively as possible?
Yeah, we expect to be out soliciting proposals for new fare collection equipment by next year. You know, and having it in place the following year. So the ability to pay with your smartphone. As we've had more and more people try transit who've never used it before, because again, they're looking for competitive options. The first thing they say is you got to make it easier. You know, if I've got to have exact change, or I got to go to this specific spot to buy my pass. Now, so many people are living their entire lives off a smartphone, so the ability to do that seamlessly, the ability to connect to the Ubers and the Lyfts and the taxis, so that you can get that first and last mile. You know, is going to, and those are things that can be done relatively quickly.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back. If you want to call, there's the number 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. Be back right after this.